Welcome to the first of today's lecture programme. I'd like to introduce visual artist and resident conceptualist at the Raster-Noton label, Carsten Nicolai. Welcome. So we're going to be hearing a bit more about what you do and seeing a bit more about what you do. But first off, I wanted to ask you kind of quite a serious question, I guess, quite a philosophical question. What is the difference between music and sound, or is there no difference between the two things?
Hello, everybody. No, I consider sound a much wider topic as music, and when we mostly talk about music, then we only talk about a very specific small frequency range inside of sound, because sound has many more frequencies we partly cannot percept, and but different animals, for instance, can percept that. Just to make examples, like elephants have totally different ranges as bats or something.
Do small animals have higher frequencies than big animals?
No, that's wrong.
I'm not a scientist.
This example probably is not proportional to the size. So, but just to give you an idea, but what sound is much more what we think of. And if you think of a classical notation language like notes, then the range of frequencies even much more narrow as maybe the classical CD standard.
Do you think But do you think there's a human tendency to turn sound into music? I mean, I know I've sometimes been in places and you hear sound around you and it kind of sounds like music almost.
I mean, this happened all the time to me, that I'm basically in kind of all day environmental situation, and you're in a huge train station and you hear the accumulation of the noise of the people and you say, wow, this is a really fantastic sound. This is but this is really sound, let's say. This is really tone, and this is I would say, I think this is a very little border where people start understanding, is this music? Is this already kind of has a musical quality, or is it just maybe a noise or something like that? But for me, for instance, noises have a strong musical content. Yeah.
So are you interested in kind of messing with this boundary between sound and music?
Sure.
In presenting sound to people in a musical context, but not necessarily in a musical way?
Yeah. I mean, as I started getting involved in sound and later in music, I mean, it's really first was sound for me. Basically, I was very much interested in perception of super high frequencies, and I did some research. I would say like self tests on my own body to find the way when I really start percepting this really ultra high frequencies and what they do to me, and what they harm me, do they over long term, do they really give me a pleasant, unpleasant feeling or something. And I had really positive and negative experience with that research. But one little aspect, what brings us maybe to the next topic, was in order to understand if I really imagine only that I hear things, or if I really hear things, I needed some visual devices. In this case was a very basic oscilloscope, to see if really the frequency is there or not there, or if I just imagine it's there or something. Yeah.
So are we heading into the kind of area of cymatics, isn't it?
Yes, cymatics is a difficult topic, because cymatics is only Janke introduced that term. It's very specific.
We're talking here about the effect that some of you may have seen some of this stuff on YouTube about people sprinkling salt over speakers and watching the kind of geometric shapes appear.
This is Chladni.
Oh, that's something different.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's this kind of principle is basically discovered by this scientist Chladni, and they described in the physics as Chladni figures, and there are many variations of that. You can do this with different materials and so on, but one of the first one who introduced it was Chladni.
So I want to stick for a minute with these experiments you're doing on yourself. I think we should hear some music, and we should also, if you have anything to show us that relates to this, we should see it. But while you're selecting some music to play to kind of introduce us to what your stuff sounds like, these experiments you're doing on yourself, what were the kind of pleasant and unpleasant experiences you had whilst subjecting yourself to super high frequencies?
Yeah, one thing was really, let's say the one really good aspect of the high frequencies was that I really felt very, especially with 11,000 hertz, I felt really really convenient, and I tried to find out why is this happening.
When you say convenient, could you expand on that?
I had a really good feeling. I really had a feeling I'm home or something, and it took me really long time to find out why this is happening. And basically, I realized when you have a TV, and early as a kid we had tube TV in our home, the tube TV constantly give a high frequency. So this is approximately 11,000 hertz. So when I played this 11,000 hertz and played on top any kind of other music, I felt really home. And I think because I've been socialized with TV, and TV was running and so on, and this is I realized that I really feel like really had a convenient feeling. Yeah.
Interestingly, so you're saying that the sound kind of provoked a nostalgic feeling in you, rather than the sound having a kind of biophysical.
Yeah, I think we have a very strong memory as well for acoustics. It's you can compare it maybe sometimes when you go in specific cities or subways or buildings or clubs, whatever. They always have a specific smell, let's say. Yeah, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So, but when you smell again, you memorize sometimes things very easy. And I think similar is with acoustics and with how a room is sounding, or how what kind of tone you're hearing. I think you have a memory for that as well. Yeah.
Because this is a kind of aside really, but I remember reading about how sometimes sound resonating at a certain frequency can make people feel like there are ghosts in the room, for example, but actually it's a particular frequency that has that impact on humans. And so some of the most haunted places were discovered actually just to have a kind of a broken fan heater that was resonating at this particular frequency that made people feel kind of slightly haunted.
And I have an amazing story about this too, because there is one guy who basically went to the doctor and said, listen, I hear all these voices telling me constantly what I have to do, that I have to become better and go shopping this and so on. And they didn't know. He thought he was just going mad, but he didn't know he had a filling in the teeth, what was working as a radio. And he was receiving radio waves. So, but the transmission was not acoustically like a speaker that you open and it was a radio, but it was through the bones. So that basically it was transmitting through the bones into the air. So this is something what is, of course, there's a lot of these kind of fantastic, beautiful stories, and I probably can talk hours about what sound can do, and of course there is a lot of imagination inside. There is a lot of research for warfare, of course, as well. For that, there's many aspects of what sound can deliver, and the only thing what I'm trying to do is when you start using sound, and music is a part of sound, then you should be aware of that possibility too. This is something what is really important. Yeah.
Now, I was there at the gig last night. I'm sure some of you were also there at the gig last night. So in terms of the kind of sound that you were delivering there, was there an intention behind that sound? Is there obviously I know that your work is very conceptual, and sometimes the building of the sound has a lot of ideas behind it. But what about the intention of the impact, or do you just not really consider how it appears to people? Is it just all in the making for you, or is there an intention in the delivery? That was a very long question. I apologize.
For me, it's always half. So let's say sometimes I have a very conceptual starting point, but mostly this kind of conceptual starting point ending up more into art pieces rather than into music pieces. And because one beauty, of course, what music has is that it has this undescribable way how you do it, right? I mean, we have no really way to describe how you can compose a great song or something, or how can you make a track, what makes you really move, or and I think this kind of directness, what this kind of ability that what you can do with sound to your feeling, this is something I really appreciate and I really like, and I not want to blur that as well, this aspect too much with conceptual ideas as well. So this is a bit kind of polarity at some points. Yeah.
Can we hear some of your music?
Yeah, I mean, I can play a track from the new album, maybe.
So this is an Alva Noto album, because obviously your name is Carsten Nicolai, but
yeah, this is another thing. As I started releasing, I released under the name of Noto, and later I used the pseudonym of Alva Noto. Don't ask me why. It's just a name, I think. And all the, let's say, more musical approach is basically all under the name of Alva Noto. Yeah, I just played the first track of the album. Oh no, that's not the first one. Wait, that's the. No, that's not.
No, I know you said that actually when you're making music, you kind of keep the concept is maybe not as important as it is as if you're making visual art. But my understanding with this record was similar to the one that preceded it, was that you were taking data from PowerPoint, Word files, this kind of thing, and then transmuting them into sound.
Yeah, this
is
was
that true, or is this kind of
just...
This was
in the Unitxt record, there was a bunch of tracks just simply took the data of programs, whatever, and converted it into audio files. And parts of that data being source sounds for other tracks. So I just wanted to show that I'm not using any synths or any kind of, so that I'm just using tools what probably everybody has available in the moment to convert any kind of file into an audio file, and then using that kind of data or that kind of information, let's say, not see it as a sound, rather as information, and just play with it as sonically, of course, then. So that was a kind of idea as well, because as we all know, when you use like normal synths or what everybody has in his house or something, it's very difficult to create a quite unique sound. So we always look for different ways to produce sound, different let's say, different synthesis basically, or different ways of using sound and making it unusual. Yeah.
So was there what were the source sounds? What was the source material for Univrs for this album?
For this album, I was a little bit more. I was not so strongly looking into the more data. I was much more interested actually in specific way of granular synthesis, and it's a little bit difficult to hear, but I produce many of the constant tones with a specific way of granular synthesis. What actually with a tool what is mainly used for vocal treatment, and I basically use that to generate something totally different, what probably the software was not intended to do. Yeah, so
would anyone here like a slightly more expanded explanation of granular synthesis?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Would you I'm not.
Yeah, okay. I'm not a real teacher, okay, but you have to understand. It's great books about it. I can write it down later. What really good books to learn that. But granular synthesis, very roughly, basically, you can generate out of. You have a sample, and then you take a small grain, and grain is a small part of the sound. What has the characteristics of the sound inside. So it's not really that you're taking the whole sound or a part of the sound. You're just taking a small grain of the sound, and then you can basically, out of that grain, you can produce tones or tonalities. What has a very unique way of. It's very different as, for instance, synthesizer who work with oscillation and so on. So it's much more. It has a very different way of producing sound with that. It doesn't exist for that long, and there are not many great granular synthesis hardware. There's not much hardware around. It's mostly software. So, but it's incredibly important it becomes more and more important in recent production tools. It's really amazing what you can do with that. It's fantastic. Yeah.
So the source material is more granular, using granular synthesis than any particular kind of using a particular type of source material.
Yeah, I mean, like a normal synth uses oscillator, LFOs, filters, and so on. Yeah. So in this case, you go back on a sample base and say you can take any kind of recording basically and generate tones out of that. So, what has of course a very special characteristic, and of course you can work with samples who have a kind of history or something what you can relate to, or
like what?
Yeah.
Like, can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, you can, for instance, say you're going to record at the city and record a specific environment or a specific noise, and this kind of noise become your source sound for a new track or for something. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Now, there was one other track on Univrs I wanted to talk about, because the vast majority of the music, as you're describing, is tonal. You're using sounds generated by machines or by granular synthesis or whatever. But then you have the track which you played last night, which has the poet kind of repeating the words, three-letter anacronyms from AAA to ZIP, going all the way through the alphabet. And actually, it sounds quite remarkable to hear it, because if you're being transported into a world that's quite, in a way, kind of a-human or quite divorced from sort of natural human sounds, and then you have a voice, even if it's quite a disembodied one, talking you through things. It was really quite impactful.
Yeah, this I don't know if everybody saw it, but I could try to show it. Yeah, for a second.
So you perform in front of a big screen, don't you? And with visuals that are kind of triggered by the sounds. But this one seemed to be obviously it was kind of presented in a different way.
Yeah, this one basically it's really a video.
Now, I want to ask you more about collaboration, but that will take us into a slightly different area. Before we do that, this is the packaging for. Is this the packaging for Univrs?
Yeah. I mean, I just pull it out. We made some special release for that as well. There's a normal CD packaging, but as well we made some DVD and the normal CD, and as well there is a live show recorded what I played in Berlin's beginning of the year. What uses a quite big visual presentation with a triple head-to-go screening of a very long software what I programmed with some friends together from Canada. Maybe we have later the time to watch that, like a short excerpt. Yeah.
So, if we're going to talk about collaboration, then we have to talk about your work with Ryuichi Sakamoto. I heard you saying that the point of collaboration was to create something that couldn't be created individually. Is that the case, and how does that relate to your work with him?
Yeah, I think for me it's very important that the collaboration basically can produce something what you're not able to do alone, let's say. Very simple. And with Ryuichi Sakamoto in this case, I think it's very easy to understand, because as I started working with him, it was basically only piano and very pure electronics. I mean, maybe I try, because maybe some people don't know that I can try play one track.
Because a lot of the people, I mean, part of the whole point actually for the musicians and producers and DJs that are here is about collaboration and about testing out collaboration for some people for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, how do you recommend or kind of what basis do you think people should find people to collaborate with? Should you be looking for someone who's very different to you? Should you be looking for someone very similar, or are there completely different criteria you should be using when you're finding someone to collaborate with?
Yeah, I believe in coincidence more or less, because I think when you're doing work, you're drifting always somewhere, and then there's a point where you meet someone where you think, wow, this is very interesting what he's doing. I maybe don't understand completely what he's doing there, and maybe it's very different, but maybe interesting to try something out. And I'd say all of the collaborations in the past been not with the idea ever to release an album or to go on tour. This was just really, in the beginning, was this a very private situation in your studio, and you just sit together and try something. Yeah. So this is how things start, and from this moment on, things develop, they evolve. Yeah. They grow.
What you say there just completely reminds me of a similar but different thing. There's a Stephen King book about writing, which is actually one of the best books about writing. And he has this suggestion that you should write with the door closed and edit with the door open. The idea is that you create as if no one's ever going to read it, no one's ever going to hear it, that it's just you in your room, or you and the person you're collaborating with in your room. But when you edit with the door open as if other people are going to see it. And in a way, that's similar to what you're saying, aren't you? That you should just, when you're working, when you're collaborating, that you just create with no sense of the future, no sense of anyone ever listening to it. So you're not second guessing what a listener might want.
Yeah.
You're just creating, and all of that stuff should come later on, any sense of a tour or an album or whatever.
Yeah. I think to transform it to a certain output, it's even another step, and it's even sometimes more difficult, because sometimes collaborations are really wonderful in the studio, for instance, in a private situation, and then you have the big trouble: how can I transform this into a recording, or how can I transform it into a show, like a live show or something? Then this sometimes takes years, and sometimes it's even not happening. Yeah, I mean. Yeah.
Are some things then just private and shouldn't be shared? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you should test and try, and if things are not good, and or if they are great but they're not maybe presentable, or you not want to share with the public, it's fine. I see this always as a learning process, and you take some kind of knowledge with you, and maybe this knowledge will come later again, and you can use it later. That's I think that's important. Yeah.
Keeping it in the drawer,
as
we say in the journalistic trade. Can we hear some music then from you and Sakamoto?
Yeah, I play a track. This was from the second album.
You did 4 or 5 albums?
5, yeah. Thank you.
How did you two start working together? And also, what was it about kind of his work in particular that appealed to you?
I started with a remix offer from him. And he sent me approximately 60 minutes of material, what I could do, whatever I wanted to do with. But from the 60 minutes was maybe 59 minutes of pure electronic stuff. And then I realized, okay, I'm not so interested in the electronic part, because that's what I do all the time. And there was this very tiny piano phrase inside. And then I said, oh, that's interesting for me, because this is something I'm not a pianist. I don't play instrument in this, and I'm not really, let's say, wanted to relate it to melodic approaches or something. So I said, why? Okay, let's try to work with this one and combine something maybe was what in the first place would not fit some really pure, simple sine waves, some pulses, some rhythmic constellations, some noises, with this kind of natural piano together. And then I sent it to him, and Ryuichi was really it was really, wow, that's great. And the next day he sent me more. sent me more piano stuff. And so over 2 years, I recorded basically the first album in the end. But it was not released. I mean, this was sitting in my studio for at least 1 year. And then at some point said, listen, we have a kind of record. Why not putting it out on Raster-Noton on our label? And you said, yeah, okay, let's do it. Yeah.
So actually, the first album was an accident in the sense of you had material coming to you, which you then treated, worked on, changed, added to, and then suddenly at some point you realised you had an album's worth of material.
Yeah, I mean, after basically 6 or 7 tracks, then you realize, oh, it makes really sense, and it's something maybe you want to share with other people, because I played it to my friends and they really liked it, and as well I started playing it all the time in my house because I really liked it, and so I said, okay, maybe it's time to share it. Yeah.
You used a phrase a second ago that I'm not familiar with. You used the phrase rhythmic constellations. Can you, even if it's just for me because everyone else might know what this is, can you tell me what's a rhythmic constellation?
Maybe it's just a translation from German or something. It's basically rhythmic patterns or something. Yeah.
It's so much more beautiful as a constellation somehow. I mean, obviously, I'm sure the answer to this is very simple, but what for you was the appeal of Sakamoto's music, or how had you kind of enjoyed it or interacted with it or kind of listened to it in the past?
Yeah, I think the great thing to work with him was basically that he introduced something into my world of sound, what I almost strictly try to avoid. He has this cinemascopic, very emotional and very, very beautiful and very harmonic feeling. Yeah, he can write wonderful melodies, and he's a great pianist as well. And that's something what really expanded my world in a way. But on the other hand as well, I'm still very shy going into that kind of very musical approach. I really kind of like to stay a little bit where I started, where I come from, with more the kind of minimal and very, very simple idea of electronic sound. I'm not so interested to move on into the next world or next trend or whatever. So with this collaboration, it feels like it's a wonderful chance to work with someone who has absolutely a great experience creating this kind of cinemascopic feeling, and I think parts of that collaboration I took maybe later into my other works back. So this is something you learn from that, and then I lost a little bit being afraid of using all these melodies. I can see there is a potential inside where I have to start slowly with.
Actually, that leads me on to another thing that I'm interested in about collaboration. Should a collaboration change you a little bit, or should a collaboration give you a better sense of who you are as an artist and kind of what your creative world is?
In the best case, maybe both. I think it should make you aware of what you do. I mean, this is as well with this collaboration was really clear that I turned out to be the conceptualist electronic musicians, what I didn't know, that I was this kind of thing. And as we start touring, I made a visual concept and the stage design, and I designed like everything necessary for this tour. And Richie was really amazed by how careful I'm planning that whole thing, because normally you hire a stage designer, maybe something like that. But I really felt like I wanna control all this visual presentation as well. So I think you should learn from each other for sure, and if it makes you aware of what you do and how you do things, it can make you a little bit stronger or more focused, let's say, in that what you maybe can achieve or which way you go in the moment. Yeah.
So is a remix situation very different for you, because you did one of the remixes on the new Björk album, didn't you?
The Volta, the old one, the Volta. Yeah, this was a really funny situation. I met Björk through Matmos, my friends Matmos, and in New York, and then the new album came out. I was quite. I kind of loved the album, I have to say, and I wrote her that, and she offered me to make the remix.
Did you email her or did you write her a letter?
Yeah, we emailed in this time, and and then the funny thing was, because basically I'm traveling with my laptop, and in this time when I got this remix offer, I had no studio because I moved to Italy, and I was living 1 year in Italy in this time, and I got, in a way, 2 remixes because I got the remix for where just not Timbaland was basically producing the song, so. I got this amazing, huge Pro Tools session, but I could not even open because I don't have the this Pro Tools. You need a maximum Pro Tools, and you need to go to a studio to open. So I called all my friends in Rome. Do you have a studio where we can open that Pro Tools session? And
sometimes the simplest things can be the most difficult.
Yeah, and no, I just wanted to see how things will be done. So what I ended up was basically, because I really had only my laptop with me, just open every single sound file what they sent at me and try to imagine how they make the song and how everything is sitting. So I never saw the arrangement in the real window, basically. So, but it was quite interesting to get all that. There've been a lot of tryout sounds inside as well, a lot of rough things untreated without effects and so on. And that was quite nice to see how things produce. I mean, how such a song is be done. That's where you can start learn from as well. But then, of course, then you do your own thing with it. You just take the parts you like, and with Björk is very easy because, of course, her voice is the main element. And but I took some modification of the beats a little bit with Timbaland did that, and that was quite funny. Yeah,
that's really taking the song apart, isn't it? That's like the equivalent of taking your whole kind of bicycle or motorbike or car kind of to pieces and laying everything out on the garage floor.
Yeah, it's a bit like you take everything apart, but you have no idea how to put it back together or something.
Do you have it here? Do you have it here to listen to?
I don't know if I have the Björk. Let me check. No, I don't have. Sorry. Yeah.
Seeing as we talked about another artist there. I mean, we should definitely talk about the label, and probably in about kind of 15 minutes or so, we're going to put it out to you lot for some questions. But can you tell us something? I mean, obviously, this isn't really the place to talk about your artistic influences, but what about actual musical influences? Who are the people that you grew up listening to, or the artists or musicians who kind of actually mean something to you?
Yeah, I in this case, I always tell this very little funny story, because I grew up in East Germany, so we had very little access to let's say, we could not go to the next record store and buy music. We had basically to look for it and find it. And of course, a lot of music was not available because it wasn't allowed. No, it was basically nothing available. Yeah. So, but you could ask your friends to borrow your record or to swap with you a tape, but the only really real-time information we had was radio. So because of East Germany, could receive some West German radio stations, and I've been a very specific radio station, what was obviously very specialized in, let's say, underground avant-garde music. Was a Bavarian radio station, Zündfunk called. I always like to mention them because I really listened almost all the features, and they played a new Peter Murphy record or Laurie Anderson, or when something really interesting came out, they played everything. But what was happening when you sometimes tuned into that radio stations, there was this kind of Russian military radio transmitter who tried to basically disturb these frequencies. And what they did was they start telling Russian numbers. But what it's maybe known under number stations. There's great websites about it. And I just needed sometimes to wait until this kind of, they stopped then maybe after an hour or sometime after 10 minutes. But anyway, I was sometimes just sitting there and listen to this Russian woman talking numbers, number. And in a way, I think one of the major influences was this listening to that kind of.
So in fact, you played a track last night which has
yeah,
the numbers.
maybe now it explains a little bit why I like that kind of very rigid, just list of things, you know, and as well, it has many aspects inside. It has this aspect inside of, it's a code. Then you're trying to imagine, okay, what is this row of numbers making? Is this kind of espionage thing here happening, or is this a secret information or whatever? And this this imagination and that thing, it's wonderful. It's a kind of ready-made, let's say, what existed, and so yeah.
It's funny actually because you just reminded me. When I was a kid, I used to have the same thing with the the shipping forecast, which is like a transmission that happens on the BBC where they describe the weather forecast for the shipping lanes all around the UK.
Yeah.
And they all have these funny names, but it kind of sounded like a strange list, maybe for spies or something.
Right.
So yeah, those things.
Yeah, when I go to the airport, I have always the feeling when I look at the boards that I'm totally like, where I am, how can I find my way here?
I mean, you know, sometimes people talk about the kind of the geographic location of music, Detroit techno, and how somehow this music is Detroity, or people talk about Jamaican music or London music as having a quality that relates to the location. Do you think that's overstated, or was your kind of childhood in East Germany? Does the kind of the effect of your
totally,
when you grew up
I think
come
really,
out in music?
Yeah, I think really. I mean, I grew up in a small industrial city, what maybe is comparable to Manchester in the UK, or I don't want to say Detroit, but it's a very rough industrial city with a lot of huge industrial architecture. It has the same problems as all these cities. All these huge factories are now half empty. The city is shrinking, and but the city doesn't have any music school or any kind of big band or something. And I think one of the greatest moments was probably in the early 90s, basically after unification, when we had a chance basically to access all computers or whatever. That this production tools start coming along, and I think one of the most easiest production tool, of course, is electronic music. Yeah? So it was really, and we've been socialized with electronic music. So
In what way?
Yeah, I mean, electronic music was really important. Let's say it was. Let's say I'm not did grow up with blues or let's say guitar music so much. I really grew up with electronic music, like early bands like Klaus Schulze, Tangerine Dream. Even Tangerine Dream I saw twice as in East Germany they played even. Yeah, so of course like early pop bands like Depeche Mode being very influential in the East as well, and or of course, like more darker bands like Untitled and Neubauten, or this being very well communicated and very culturally we felt really home in that area, I have to say.
Just, I mean, again, this is possibly showing my ignorance now, but was that music kind of considered allowed? I mean, how? So how much was that? How much was that kind of music controlled or considered unacceptable under the regime, or was it actually kind of there was some stuff that was acceptable?
Of course, I mean, my generation, I was very lucky that in the end, let's say from '85 on, the government didn't control much anymore, and I've been or let's say if they controlled it, they controlled it in a way that they allowed more to happen. There been very young bands. Actually, this was that's maybe interesting. Olaf Bender and Frank Bretschneider, who I'm running the label with, the main founders, they had a record deal in East Germany, and they been basically a band who did electronic music in this time, let's say. And so there been possibilities inside that system. Of course, not fantastic, but there been possibilities. Very small, very slightly. And there was one radio station what even had feature this kind of music really intensively, and of course the people really follow that really a lot, let's say, because almost everybody I know hear that radio station, and this, because there was so little information available, then this information was really important. Yeah, this was kind of effect of this kind of limitations, let's say.
Now, you just mentioned the record label, Raster-Noton, which actually started life as 2 record labels.
Yes.
And then came together. Do you want to just tell us a bit about kind of how those came about? And
Yeah, I have some images, so I will show a little bit of images as well. Okay, this is a little movie, but I skipped this one. Okay, this just live performances, Frank, Olaf, me. But the label was founded basically, this story I always like to tell, because there was no other label who basically was around what we could imagine would like to release our stuff.
Always the reason to start a label.
Yes.
There's nowhere else to do our thing.
Yes. No, and the other thing was as well, like as I mentioned, Olaf and Frank being always had a record deal in the east part and even in the west part. It was very important. It was really important because for us to control as well the packaging, how things come out, and this was never really satisfying for Olaf and Frank especially. And as I started my little edition, let's say, it was rather edition than a label, I was only interested to make really beautiful objects rather than distributing it and bringing it into the shops or something. And this is some live performances, but maybe I show some packages. Maybe what? Yeah, for instance, this kind of CDs that we released in, when is it? That was 96, I think. We had a series of CDs called the Clear series. So we tried to make really everything so minimal and really transparent. As well, coming from the music, this record is, for instance, a record with Mika Wainio from Panasonic, what was another collaboration, but the first collaboration ever, I think. And we try to be really careful with everything, with the sound and how sound is presented in the packaging, and we just wanted to control that so much as possible. Yeah.
It's funny when you mention Panasonic. I always think of. I started out working on a magazine called Jockey Slut, and like in the mid-90s in Manchester, and my colleague Joanne Wayne, another writer there, interviewed Panasonic. And the thing I remember so strongly is them saying, our music is raw, like horse meat, which always just sounded like the most remarkable way of describing your music, in a way that someone who wasn't from Finland probably would never imagine to say. But yeah, so Panasonic, one of the people that you've released on your label.
Not Panasonic, but Mika and Ilpe. Panasonic have only been with Blast first, but but they're really good friends, and of course our music and how it's really Panasonic are really like in our tradition, and we're really good friends. Yeah.
Okay, so before, I guess we should put it out to some questions. You have something, you're going to play us something as well at the end, aren't you? So how long is that? We need to make sure we've got enough time to play that.
It's 4 minutes.
We're on quite a tight schedule, aren't we? You have to be back at the airport pretty pronto.
Yeah.
Okay then, so while you guys kind of get your questions ready, do you want to just tell us about because you wrote an opera as well, didn't you? Or did you?
Yeah, kind of.
Is this the internet telling lies?
I with Michael Nyman we wrote a kind of opera. Yeah, but this is too far now. This is another topic.
Okay. All right then.
I tried to find this one video. Just
okay, perhaps who can we get the radio mic, the mic ready, please? Because we have a question over here.
Well, can you pass it around, please?
Hi. In the beginning, you said that you actually extracted sounds from software. Do you mean like from pieces of code? And how exactly do you go about doing that?
It's very simple. There are some basic editors what allowed you to import raw data, and then you can basically grab any file. Yeah. That's very easy. Or you can, if you want to make it more difficult, you you have to rewrite the headers of the files, and then you can open it in any program. Yeah. Yeah.
If you hold on, because you need the microphone.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the people afterwards won't know what you're asking.
Yeah, sure. So is it basically just converting the file bits and transcoding them as sound?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
in a way, it's a kind of interpretation, because of course the file doesn't tell you exactly what is left and right channel, so they kind of take the file as it would be a music file or something, and then it just opens up, and it's great noise. Let's say what happens. Sometimes it's surprisingly melodic, sometimes it's totally noise, and yeah.
And do you also experiment with the signal processing and using some algorithms to process sound, right? And try to variate the actual equations themselves rather than just the parameters. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I never was so super interested in, let's say, real-time processing. I mean, there's Maximus P, and there's a great tradition of building instruments who can do that, and I think plugins and this whole culture is huge. But I was always more interested actually in doing it offline, let's say, calculating it out, listen to it, see what I really like from it, what I really it makes, and then if I feel like it's all right, I use it. I was never really so interested, for instance, in this kind of organic, real-time processing idea. I do this sometimes in concerts with Sakamoto, for instance, or with Blixer Barger when I have material, but it was always a little bit too uncontrolled for me, let's say. Yeah, but it's kind of nice, but yeah, I'm not this kind of freak in this kind of.
And the visuals, are they animated or are they triggered like you said, right? So how does that happen technically?
Technically, I involve, like last night, for instance, I have 3 layers technically what I'm using. One is programmed surface. Basically, a digital programming is behind, where I use Quartz Composer. Maybe some people know. It's a graphical programming environment where you can program visuals, but it's basically all based on sound analysis. And on top of that, I built a hardware device what allows me to feed audio into the signal way of the video and distort the video signal. And that produces as well mainly line patterns. And since I built this little device where I basically can, out of my application, send the channels into the video and manipulate specific colors and color patterns and so on. So the connection of the sound to the image is absolutely direct. So when I play a sound, the image sometimes you see is the sound. It's nothing else. So and the third way is what I involved maybe the first time as well, where I involved really like parts of movies. Like for instance, the movie I show with the logos, I have to prepare that. I cannot do this in real time. So, but I'm using Quartz Composer as well, implementing parts of the tracks where this is running, and synchronizing it with my files in the live application, and then I have the possibility that the video runs, and I can manipulate on top of that. But yeah, so it's kind of free.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, just for a personal project, I'm interested in measuring frequency, but what's a sort of an effective and inexpensive way to do that? I'm not very familiar with the equipment.
There's a lot of software, very inexpensive software.
In particular, what I'm interested is sort of biogeometry, measuring harmonics and frequencies within shapes. So it's an installation
okay,
that I'm
what,
thinking
what
about.
exactly? Is that
So I
describe?
would like to measure frequency within space.
In space.
Well, I've got an idea of, in particular, a pyramid and like measuring.
I see.
So
Yeah, do you
So
need
an
a-
actual device.
yeah, there is the most simple thing, and what is really fantastic, what I can really recommend is the new Motu comes with a analyzer, what is absolutely incredible, and really simple. Probably, I don't know if you have a most recent Motu here. They come with a software package where basically you can use that analyzer.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. Yeah, and very impressive. And of course, you need a microphone and a good sound card. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question over to your other side.
Hi, just wanted to ask if there has been at some point like any connection to the people from Mille Plateau.
Yeah, I released on Mille Plateau. Yeah, I released 2 albums on Mille Plateau and on several compilations. Yeah, and unfortunately the label doesn't exist anymore. But I think it was a quite active part of that. Let's say clicks. They call it clicks and cuts, what I really hate. But yeah, I did for them some albums. Yeah. Is this what you?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
like other than that, or was it just like you releasing there, or?
Frank made an album for Mille Plateau, Frank Bretschneider, and myself as well. And then they had a bunch of in compilation, like one is Cyclo, the collaboration with Ryuichi Sakamoto I have. This we released one track on the label, but basically Mille Plateau was as well very they observed what the younger label doing in the moment, and I think as we came up, I think they really tried to incorporate us a little bit in their label, and what was kind of okay, I think, to collaborate in this way. We it helped both labels, I think. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Hi, I also have a technical kind of question because I'm also interested in visual art and audio installations, and the project I would like to carry on is, when the sound is generative and it is triggered by the movements in space. So, like, there might be some photo elements, some devices that perceive the movements of human body and transform them into generative sound. So could you please tell a bit of technical side of the question? So maybe some software or some
The most
hardware.
simple device what can do that is actually a theremin. Yeah, what I really love. I think it's one of the best things ever invented. And it's this Russian Lev Termin, this inventor from 1910. I mean, it's really early. Maybe some people know. It's still, you can build yourself one, what is great probably, and goes all wrong, I'm sure. And or you can buy one, what is quite expensive from Moog. They have one for, I think.
No, actually there are even toy devices,
Maybe.
Japanese toy Termin
yeah,
device.
that's even better.
But it is the specific sound that Termin produces. But
No, it's not really. It actually is assigned to oscillators, but of course you can change that. You don't need necessarily to have it in this kind of frequency with this kind of oscillator. You can assign it to any kind of. I mean, I used, for instance, Depfor was a modular system, and they had theremin modules, and you can basically use the theremin modules as LFOs or as whatever. I mean, it's basically producing a frequency, what you can use as oscillating, like as the pure frequency, but you can use it as well as a modulation for another frequency or whatever, where you can tune whatever frequency you want to have. Yeah. But the physical device, the hardware, like the theremin module, is maybe one of the most direct ways. Of course, there are other tracking systems. I worked with infrared tracking systems in the past, and but I really can recommend to go for the theremin. But the theremin has one disadvantage: it's not very far. It's maybe, if you're lucky, you go like 2 meters, but it's not more than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
If it's enough, then try this.
So do we have any more questions?
Yeah, another question, but on that topic, I think if you know a fair bit of programming, you can use Microsoft's Kinect system, and you can actually track, like, I think up to 8 people. So if you can actually program software, I think you'd be quite well off with that sort of hardware. Like it has, like, I think 2 cameras and an infrared, and you can actually measure depth and movement in X and Y. So I think it's pretty useful, but you have to know how to program.
Okay, so before you're going to show us this film, but kind of my final question to you before we see that is just, you said at the beginning, or you've said in the past, that you were interested in finding out what sound was, and that's what led you from being a visual artist to someone dealing with sound, to someone making stuff which sits in the kind of broad area of music. Would you say now that you can say that you know what sound is?
No, at all. I mean, it's a fantastic universe, but when you start really researching on it, that you're realizing how little we really know. It's really unbelievable how little knowledge we have about sound. It's really, and I wish there would be more research on that. What probably can solve a lot of problems. I make a small example. Yeah, there is a phenomenon. They call it phenomenon because it's still not clear what's happening. And this phenomenon was discovered in 1938 from 2 scientists who did actually research on sonar systems.
You mean, is this like a chemical in the body?
No. It's called the bubble sonoluminescence.
Okay.
And it's
a phenomenon. So it's
a phenomenon. It's kind of something what basically it's not. We cannot really explain why it's happening, but we can see it's happening. And what is happening is basically it's a frequency of approximately around 28,000 hertz. What is not so super high. I mean, it's out of our hearing, but it's still sound. And this, in the right way, attached to some small glass with water inside, can produce a bubble what has more than 10,000 degrees temperature inside. And this could be a possible energy source, for instance. That could be, let's provide us energy in a very small scale, just putting this little glass on top of the table and providing all the energy we need for here right now. And this is something what I think is really incredible. Let's say there are scientists researching on that kind of source of idea of. And but it's still it's unstable, so that's the reason we cannot really use it. But for instance, if there would be more research on that, I think sound can be incredibly helpful for all kinds of purposes.
Yeah. Wow, sound is power.
Yeah.
Hi, I know of artists that were working with these bass frequencies that can't actually be heard. Have you ever worked with this kind of thing?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, sure. Yeah, what do you want to know about it?
No, how hard is it actually to have the speakers that can reproduce that kind of sound?
It depends how low you want to go. Let's say, but we are like this is a nice speaker actually, and probably they go down to 27, 25 even hertz, but we don't hear this much anymore. Basically, you see probably more the membrane moving and the wind it making. Yeah, you will hear more air moving rather than a tone. But to hear that or to perceive that kind of low frequency, actually, it's better to use even like things who can vibrate a floor, for instance, or something, a chair. And there are devices for drummers, for instance, when they rehearse, where they put a little transducer under the chair to feel the bass drum really kicking in or something. So this kind of devices exist. They're called transducer. And I played in one venue in San Francisco some time ago, where they had incredible sound system, and additional to that, these transducers in the floor for everything, let's say below 50 hertz was in the floor. And this was really kind of scary overtaking your body. It's kind of hard to the body too. I mean, yeah. But we like bass. I think many people like bass, but this can be quite demanding for the body too.
a grueling marathon of bass. So, what are you going to show us?
Yeah, I would like to show a video. What is it? Rather a short film. I just lost. I have to look again for it. What I made for one of the tracks from the last album, and yeah.
The only thing really that's left to say is Carsten Nicolai, thank you very much.
Thank you.